So as Africans, I think now, as Africans, we tend to confuse um, the intentions of the rule of law on our continent. And the rule of war was implemented most of most of the time by the UN, and it was basically to stop the fighting, to stop the war, to stop the body counts. And the more countries were liberated, the more involved foreign countries were in the implementation of um, the rule of law upon our countries. And with this violent past, uh, we tend to idolize people. We tend to idolize criminals, basically, because with the rule of law now, if someone had the intentions of or if someone used brute force, and I mean brute violent force, as a means to an end, then it sort of comes into our democracy, and in our democracy, this is absolutely illegal, right? But this was a necessity for the times back then. It was a necessity to sort of try and um, force the hands that be to practice equality, right? So you get the hero worshipping, basically. When we think about what a hero is in African standards, we usually think about the African that overthrew the ABC, the African that overthrew, the colonial dictators, the Africans that saved us. All of that narration really is the life of the people zoomed into to see how they were living during all of these conflicts, and how these conflicts forced different they basically forced different scenarios in terms of, do you fight for your life or do you fight for the life of others? And this was bloodshed, it was war, right? It was absolute war. But in a democracy, brute force is illegal. And this thinking of but back then it causes a mentality of non accountability, because we all know most of the leaders that we have in Africa, they are basically they were criminals at some point. At some point they were criminals. I mean, even Nelson Mandela was a criminal at some point, right? This is before he was transformed into a political brand by the ANC. So, you know, and I think he's one of the few that actually served his time, and rightfully so, because in in today's era, it's not a question of do we want, right? Do we want, or it should be like this, or no? It's not a question of that. Now it's a question of accountability. If you have done wrong, you are brought to book. But if you did wrong in the past, and I'm talking about heinous crimes, and you got away with it, that sort of feeling of being untouchable, it sort of lingers over you. You feel like you are, you're the one that, it feels like the whole country is property. And obviously there are nostalgic thoughts, like if it was back in the day, you wouldn't get away with this, you know. So if you were a troublemaker back then, you got tortured or you would get assassinated, right? It was real political warfare. So now it's transformed into political battles. Political battles in the sense of violence, any form of violence, should be viewed as barbaric, stupidity, idiotic. And all of the people that try to perpetuate this kind of behavior, right? All of these people, they should get shamed. They should be ashamed of themselves, because if we don't call if we don't call them to book, they would still have that I am untouchable mannerism. So information redistribution, I I let it go, I let it flow, but I also wanted to sort of remove the sense of immortality that some African leaders have. And at first it didn't seem like that stance would work, and then it did, right? Because it was pleading to the humanities of these powerful individuals. If I angered, if I angered someone, it it was intentional at the time too, I guess. Um, because when emotions are brought to the front, then you know what kind of emotions this individual accepts, what kind of emotions they try to keep away. So we don't want yes men to completely take over, because just think of it like kings. When a king has a ball or dance or whatever they used to call that stuff, rich people would come from all neighboring kingdoms and such and such and such to come and dine with the king, to come and give him proposals and suggestions, all in the name of self-sustainability and self-enrichment. So this kind of I don't know if I should call it trickery, but this kind of bribing, right? The bribing of people that are in high positions of government in order to bend the rules a little bit. Uh, that's corruption, right? And you know, just look at it from the traditional authorities onward. The amount of money that they get from government, they use completely individualistically for them and their families. They don't at any point empower their communities. If they did empower their communities, believe you me, these communities would be thriving, and they wouldn't look to the central government for some form of relief. But constantly, every time in Namibia, we keep hearing cries of something happened and the government is called to intervene. It's the same with gender-based violence. When the government decided to declare a national prayers day, this showed the lack of understanding, no offense, the lack of understanding of why would a sane person commit these heinous crimes, and how do you sort of appeal to your citizens. And it showed a complete failure of understanding what's on the ground and how the Namibian population lives. Complete failure of that. to to say that every time people go to church, whatever sin they have committed is absolved. That's basically what it sort of said. It was it was a nation trying to show empathy toward the people on the ground, um, but at no point was there a practical uh, practical countermeasures used. most of the countermeasures were from churches, right? Nowadays, the church does not have uh, the kind of power that it used to have back in the day when they were harboring so-called terrorists and they were appealing for freedoms of various liberation struggle factions. This is obvious in all of Africa how religion played a role, to motivate people against their current changing environments. Because when the big powers are playing at each other, it's that saying, when elephants fight, it's the grass that suffers, right? The elephant at no point will look down and say, I apologize, grass. No, the elephant doesn't know how the grass came to be there, right? So the practical measure against things like gender-based violence, um, as I see it, would be to sort of look at the environments where this is prevalent, where it's happening the most. You look at those environments and you put them on a scale. This was done. It was done before by a gentleman who passed away last year. He created a website that did this, where people could report, gender-related crimes and so forth. Um, but it didn't have the blessing of the government, right? So the institutions that are there already, they they lack dialogue. They don't dialogue with the people. It's like the people have no form of relief, so they internalize this. Let's not forget we are emotional creatures, so this is internalized. When this is internalized, the frustration builds, and two people could start having arguments over the smallest thing, and eventually, snap, it happens. uh, it's rage, it's pent up rage being taken out on the closest person, right? The person in the vicinity, the person who has become sort of the punching bag of the other person. So if there was any sort of seriousness about this, I remember that there were campaigns when I was in safari. There were campaigns, and we had, even on our rulers, there were pictures of mines, and how to avoid stepping on a mine. This was because of they were in, I don't know how many people stepped on landmines that were, they during the war times, they were planted there, and it worked. The kids were informed about the dangers of landmines and such by the teachers, and they were on TV. There were adverts about the dangers of mines and such, including the HIV prevention advertisements that used to play, where they would sort of try to take away the shame that people have in terms of using protection, and to try and encourage people to use protection to prevent against STDs. This stuff was on television until some people decided it was way too graphic for children to see, and it was removed. This is wrong. Social studies, that's a part of human development. And then this child grows up to become a man who never learned that lesson while he was a child. Who's better off? Who's safer? Right? So there are a lot of taboos in our communities, and these taboos are cultural. as opposed to national. There's, you have to, you're not allowed to talk back to your elders is one thing, right? You should respect your elders. When someone is older than you, you must respect them. These are good manners, yeah, sure. But it also depends on the scenario in which you find yourself. If an old man challenges me, if an old man decides to challenge me, and I accept the challenge, then it is what it is. That's the scenario, right? So, there's respect and conduct. In the military, you could have some young guy who has a higher rank, nepotism, corruption. I won't really touch on this. You have someone who's younger and higher rank than an old man who's on his way to retirement, who's still, I don't know how the ranking system of soldiers work, but you could just say he's still at the bottom. This person would be put in a position where they have to respect their senior, not senior in age, but senior in rank, senior in skill, supposedly, although most of the case this isn't the case. So the whole taboo thing doesn't say start cursing and lashing out at elders and all of that. No, it just means if you're in a teaching dialogue or a learning dialogue, or you want to pass on a certain opinion, um, this is adding on to what that individual already has most of the time, right? Giving them different sets perspectives on how things can work and in which directions they can go. So African politics, which is sort of stuck between traditional politics as well as modern politics, which then modern politics doesn't understand the economic and business uh, the economic and business institutions in their countries. Thus, when they attempt to sort of be competitive against the private organizations, it usually ends up with someone stealing more money. Yeah, it ends up with someone stealing more money because it's not really business driven. There is no sense of win. And in the private sector, that is a must. So you get government that is too lax, basically. Accountability is not promoted highly. And I'm speaking of Africa now, like in terms of the transformations that Africa needs to make, that we need to make, that we need to keep on pushing to enforce. Because if we don't, what other citizens will, right? So you get a government that doesn't understand business uh, trying to enter the business the business, the private sector industries, and trying to use the money that they have, because most of the times the government obviously has money, trying to use their money to overpower private industries. This is also wrong, because there is this sense of the more money, the more it costs, then the safer it is in terms of the competitive elements. And this is completely wrong. It's completely wrong. Government should be encouraging entrepreneurship, not based on the government structures, government bodies and all of that. No, they should adhere to the rule of law, obviously. And competition and consumer rights clauses, policies should be uh, brought or put forward that help the upstarts, to sort of gain leverage and start to uh, bring up the GDP based on the private sector. Because most entrepreneurs are not entrepreneurs by choice, right? This is evident when you go out. You know there are always vendors and people selling this, from belts to hats to meat to all of that. They are not entrepreneurs by choice, so they are not good entrepreneurs because they lack that skill, right? They are taking that risk because they have nothing to lose, but they still aspire to become someone's employee. They still aspire for a job as opposed to creating jobs. That's why everyone is basically using the same kind of business model as the other people. And these models are not reliable. They are not reliable because, like the communal areas where you ask for the chief to give you land and he gives you a piece of land, and you start farming, you start producing for yourself. That's the kind of mentality. That's the kind of mentality that exists in our attempts at entrepreneurship. And this means when investors come in to invest, the money is not used most of the time for what it's supposed to be used, because the people getting the money don't know how to use it. Money isn't a tool for them. Money is money. I have money now, I'm rich. Yes, I made it. That's all I wanted. Those aren't entrepreneurs. They are the rot, the curse upon entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs, real entrepreneurs, don't shine because they lack the protection and blessing from government. Look at our shops, most of the shops, ShopRite, Spar, Clicks, all of those monopolies are foreign. They are businesses that were started in South Africa, which became commercially successful, and thus, just like KFC, um, they are able to throw remnants of their businesses in our tiny country. I wonder if Botswana or Zimbabwe, those kind of countries, whether they also have Spar all over the place. Pick and Pay, Shoprite, just South African entities, foreign elements. If you look at China, they have their own sort of KFC. They have their own sort of Facebook, Twitter. They empower their entrepreneurs to use those foreign models as opposed to being used by those foreign models, right? And the whole, we are not an industrial country. We're not an industrial country, and we're not an industrial country because we don't we don't encourage it. If you want businesses to thrive, you have to enforce it. Has to be competitive. And what is competitive? Competitive is not the more you have. It's usually, most of the times, if you want to be competitive, if you're in the big league, there's that, you hear that stuff where they say the only person that knows, the only person I compete with is the mirror. That sort of concept means that you are driven to become better than yourself constantly. And this should be the sort of nature that is put on our business. They should have the nature of, okay, these are our errors, let's improve upon that. Okay, this shop is dirty and the racks aren't they are not properly placed, or do we have better payment systems that we could adapt, you know, lots and lots lots and lots of scenarios that don't play out because people use the government as a safety net, as an umbrella. And when I say government, and I'm speaking about Africa, I mean parties. People use the parties to sort of cover. When the business has failed, they are not really punished. And when I say punished, I'm not saying punished by the law or whoever. No, they are not punished by life. Because in life, if it doesn't work, it fails. Then you have to go back, regroup, go back again and see what will work. But this isn't there because there is a lack of accountability. You waste all of that money and all you get is some front page article that's saying money wasted, or it's news, but it has nothing to do with where to now. Did you borrow this money? Will the bank will you end up throwing your debt into the ocean of our country's banking system? The entrepreneurs, of course. The entrepreneurs, they are not entrepreneurs. They basically figured out how it works. You become a yes man, you kiss up to someone in a high rank, you sweet talk them into giving you some multi-million-dollar contract, and that's it. That was your goal. As soon as you get that money, you have already finished. You have your goal. So the goal doesn't have competition. There is no sense of, if you can do this well, we'll get someone else. It's not there. These kind of things. A government that is accountable to no one is not functioning very well. It's not going smooth. Right? Accountability first. Accountability is trust. That means transparency. If the government is giving out tenders, let everybody know what are the procedures. And the other fact that the government is non-profit. Governments they are not there to make profits. And this is what most people that work in government don't get. What you're doing is delivering service to the people. You're delivering services to the people. That's your win. That's your goal, technically. Private sector, that's where you get the need for profit, because the economy needs, the cogs of the economy need to move. So private sector, public sector, sector not accountable, private sector too needed by government to be held accountable. Thus, the real entrepreneur can't thrive. They are just people who want that break. And are not natural entrepreneurs. And a lot of people that are in politics that are not natural politicians. Not only the fact that they lack leadership skills, but also the fact that the sense of duty doesn't trickle down all the way to the citizens. And citizens that don't trust their governments, this happens everywhere, right? Because, yeah, but government is not an individual. Government is not an individual. So, this mindset, this awakening of Africa, this awakening of Africa should also instill a sense of competition in us against the other continents. We should not aspire to have everything they have. We should aspire to make everything that we have better than the things that they have. We have to manage. Uh, we have to manage our countries better than their countries are being managed. We have to look after our people better than their people are being looked after. That's basically it. The new breed of Africans. The new breed of Africans is stuck between the past and the present. The new breed of Africa are forced to acknowledge the past, forced to acknowledge the past and accommodate it in the present. And that is completely unfair. Remember, we did this. Remember, we did this. Remember, no, forget. That just does not matter. Their dear diaries do not matter to the citizen. They should not. Unless it's remember now, because most of our independent Africas went wrong at some point. So it should be, remember how we messed up there? Well, we're correcting it here. And it should be known by the people. Let it be known. If journalists and all of that are trying to attack the individual as opposed to their office, let it be known who someone is getting married to or who they were married to does not concern the citizen. That is none of our business. It's nobody's business. Unless that individual allows it, sure. But that sort of mixing this and mixing that until the real story disappears. Headlines, all of that stuff. It does